going to say this is the end of the playthrough. So what this means is this is going to be the time to, normally I would say this is time for the review, which is amazing because I didn't know what that means, but I'll find out who Raycast is and stuff. Yeah, there's a lot of big things coming. Hold on, I'm going to check something really quick. Be right back. BRB. Well, anyway, this is, okay, I'll go ahead and go straight into, straight into the review now then, because, like, this game is actually really short, so my review, by consequence, is also going to be pretty short, so, let's see. So, normally how this works is the review goes with, so normally we do, like, story, gameplay, graphics, and, like, story, graphics, sound, gameplay, which is kind of controls and the game design, and I guess I'll just give it a whether or not I recommended playing it. With a thumbs, it's usually a thumbs up, thumbs down, and rent or buy, depending for thumbs up, and thumbs down rent or thumbs down just thumbs down period. Just don't get it. Play this. Usually we haven't had any games that I've ever actually said thumbs down period, but it's very rare, but there's maybe one or two, I think. But enough about that. So what do I think? So one nice thing about the story is, how do you rent games nowadays anyway? I know it's like, maybe I should just say thumbs up, try from a friend or something. Yeah, you don't really rent games these days. There's rent boxes, but rental booths. But anyway, well, let me go ahead and go to the story section. Honestly, the story is pretty short. It's actually like, for all the philosophical stuff that's implicated here in this game, the main story's like actual story can really be summed up very, very quickly. Like, basically, Dex is found, and then Raycast breaks her out. She meets Decker and Tony, and then they go take down the GSV-2 to stop the complex from creating something to control the AI, the Kether. After that happens, they eventually, Raycast says like, hey, you should probably meet me, and then, but unfortunately, like, it's actually like Raycast has to kind of like make sure the complex captures you, so to make sure you get to the place where he is. And that unfortunately also means Decker gets drawn into, which is how he dies. And then anything else. And after that, if you make certain choices, you can choose to say like, you can say like, I don't believe in your cause, or or I'll choose your cause. It seems like it doesn't actually matter, because eventually you'll get taken to the Crow anyway. And so after you've done all that, you go to space, you meet the Crow, you talk for a bit, and you beat the GSV-2, and then you choose whether or not to destroy the complex by destroying the Kether, or whether or not you choose to be one with the Kether and become, like, you'll have free will for sure, because the GSV is gone, the original program. So yeah, it's actually like, I just summarized it. It's actually not that long, but what actually makes the stories the actual overall narrative actually more interesting is like just seeing like all the people that the side characters actually help to flesh out the world. And that's actually one of the things I like about it, is that like the Harbor Prime feels like there's actually a character that represents some part of this like shady city. There's Dr. Holm, who's like, or Mr. Holm, who's like kind of like the guy providing the medicine. He's just like, yeah, take down these guys. So like, people are taking advantage of people's like the medicine trade, and giving like poison medicine, like, and just how seedy Harbor Prime really is. Oh, by the way, I'm also going to, maybe I'll lower down the volume just a little bit too, because I'm in review mode right now. So I think the side quests really do, like, because otherwise the main quest is like, it's kind of interesting and I like it and all, but like, I don't think it's quite long enough to feel satisfying, which is why it's nice that you get to talk to all the other NPCs, and like, they're pretty interesting people themselves too. And you can find out more about, yeah, even like the longest side quest, which is the Shun side quest, is actually pretty cool too. You at least can choose whether or not you want to be to help the bad guys or the good guys. What's actually one thing that I noticed that, like, although I personally picked choices I'd rather pick because, like, I'm a good guy, I think. I didn't want to be... I wanted to do the right thing, but it seems like you would actually... With all the NPCs, you could have actually possibly done some of the less... the bad choices. Like, you could... In Shen's case, you could have said, like, I'm not gonna save you. Oh, okay, whatever. I'll just tell Chun Tao that you're here in the place, and then that means you can keep Shen there as a drug addict. And then you could have chosen not to save... You could choose not to save Navarre. And you could have forced your way... You could have just killed, like, Seifer, too. The guy who was, like, in the sewers. So it actually pretty cool. Like, you actually get to see, like, wow, this crime runs rampant. There's some, like, shady stuff. And, like, there's these big corporations that have so much power. I don't know if the choices would have influenced the ending. I should check that. But, I mean, we only chose whatever we chose for this stream. I don't have to show every single choice you could make, because that would take forever. And, like, there's a lot of other playthroughs where you can do that as well. And so, I mean, one other thing I wanted to mention is that the setting is actually really cool, too. Like, I'm a little bit, I guess I technically am not, like, I'm kind of biased toward this kind of setting, because it reminds me a lot of other games. Other shows I've seen, like Akira, or, actually, this game actually reminds me a lot of Ghost in the Shell, so there's also this thing where, like, how augmented can you be and still be human, right? I think, like, Ghost in the Shell kind of covers a bit of this too, but in this game is sort of like, even Dex at first is like worried about, like, do I really have to become a cyborg? And it's like cybernetic, and like there's always this thing of like, and there's even like the conflict with like the people, like the true bodies, who are just like, hey, no, we have to stop all these implants, and they actually start attacking people with implants by like infecting, like literally going to the market and dropping like these fake implants. So there's all these like crazy political things that are going on as well. So yeah, it's actually really interesting. It covers, there's some stuff in there that's a little bit more like there's a lot of stuff that's like even somewhat philosophical. So it will kind of go over the like, if you're not, I feel like this isn't really a game that can be played by the younger kids. It's definitely geared toward an audience that's like, you have to be thinking, your brain has to be kind of awake for this game to play, to like really like feel like you're getting the most out of the story, because otherwise it'll just kind of, everything just kind of goes over your head. There's a lot of like stuff, and it gets, especially the ending gets a little bit heavier, where you start having to think of like, what's real? I don't know. Anyway, the endings are kind of ambiguous. Like, the endings don't cover too much, but at least like the ending we chose was at least we got to know like what happened, and like Dex became just a normal person. As normal as someone who's so awesome at fighting can be, right? So yeah, I really did enjoy the story. It's short, but I got a lot of fun out of it. Yeah, the younger kids. Yeah, we cannot have like, yeah, kids can't play this game. No, there's just too much. Yeah, I had to actually put a mature rating on this game, because there's content that I can't show the kids. Actually, honestly, I could have done that for Kudelka as well. But anyway, sorry, I'm just overthinking about that. Let's see. What else did I want to say? Okay. So, the other thing I actually was kind of impressed by was the graphics of the game. So, you could tell, like, the world is lovingly crafted, like, all the little details. Oh, did we ever figure out what those condoms and porn mags were for, though? No. I don't actually think they're for anything. I believe they're just there if you can sell them if you'd like. I think those are just like little extras that you can just, it's kind of crazy that you can dispense condoms. It's just like, it's just showing like this kind of like how seedy the city really is. Even in downtown, you get like condom dispensers. I'm like, what? You would never see that in the real world in most places. And so, oh yeah, the other thing, like, they were even talking about, like, you could, oh yeah, before we go to graphics, like, there were also, like, talk about, like, how young people are no longer listening to music just by by their ears. They're actually having like music players implanted in their head, so they just experience it music in their head. It's kind of weird, right? But yeah, it just makes you think about what our future could hold. Like maybe people will start having chips implanted in them. Honestly, I'm not really for that stuff, but it could happen. We could all become cyborg. Well, we, as in a figurative, we could all become cyborgs one day. Who knows? Ooh. No. Anyway, I don't want to get hacked. I don't want my brain to get hacked, though. Yeah, no, that'd be okay. So the graphics of the game, like the artwork is really nice, actually. Like even the cutscenes, like the art style is actually really cool. It's very much like in the tone of like of a Western art, Western style, but very much like it's gritty and like more like it's certainly not. It certainly presents a more serious tone, and even like in the NPC portraits in the world are kind of reflect that as well. And like there's a lot of loving detail on every part of the world. Like the city is actually really well realized, and you can see like there's so many like graffiti and like and these little touches to make the world feel alive. Like so this world of cyberpunk, like every single place you go to, you're like, oh, this really reminds me of like a really unique city. And so it's one of the more it's a pretty different setting than like anything we've played on this stream. And it was actually really cool to experience the world like that. Even in, like, we're only playing in 2D, by the way. This is not even a 3D game, too. And you can tell, like, all the 2D artwork, it was like, I don't even know how long they could have done. I don't know who did, like, the artist who did a bang-up job on this one. And it's nice that you can for the most part, on the graphics, you can mostly tell what's interactable. They were very smart to, like, mark things, like, things that you could, things that you could interact with or highlight it to, like, make them stand out. And, like, I like that there's a lot of computer terminals. They made sure that the hacking terminals are always red, if you've noticed. So you make sure you're, like, anticipating, like, oh, there's a hacking terminal. So it's actually really fun to go through all of, like, the world and see what you could explore. Like, the world makes you interested, because, like, every place has, like, some kind of personality. Or, like, oh, like, the slums is really slummy. It's kind of crazy. And so you made you want to explore all the places. So I really like enjoyed the graphics a lot. Like it's really well done. And I actually really like this title screen too, as well. And like yeah, I actually think my favorite part is actually like the cutscene, like the movies are actually really cool looking too. You can actually get a nice view of all like the art and the characters. And so, like, all the characters' designs have personality, so you're not going to forget who they are. They're like, oh, they remind me of real, like, some people you might have met before, too. So, it's a very realistic style. Let's see. So, what do I have to say about the music? Oh my goodness, I love the music in this game. Like, it's... I know, like this very this orchestral start in the front is really cool. But I actually kind of like the... like I love how atmospheric like the game's music can be, like even like in the quieter sections. Yeah, the time screen music is nice. Like even every section of the game, that the city has its own theme, and it's actually really cool to like kind of like enforce the feel of that. So like the soundtrack is really good. It's actually probably among my favorite soundtracks I've played on the games on this stream. This is probably among my favorites. The sound effects are pretty cool. Like they certainly sound what they're supposed to sound like. I think though the sound effects in cyberspace is a little funky. It does sound like a dog barking sometimes. Pew pew, bark bark. I like that's pretty much how you describe cyberspace. But the cyberspace tracks themselves are really cool too. Actually, the voice acting in the game, like it's mostly like I only heard the Czech audio, so it sounds good. And like there's a lot of characters where they had like very odd ways of speaking. There's some characters that talk really slow though, like the Crow and Georgich. No, they take forever. But like for the most part, like at least like they actually tried really hard to make sure all the NPCs were voiced, even like ones that don't. It sounded like barking all the time. So make sure that all the sounds were really like the shooting, and then there's like the alarms, And the cool thing is but like yeah, the music is like really good. I'm totally gonna get the OST for sure and listen to it. Yeah, it does like have that like kind of cybery techno-y feel, but there's some orchestral parts too, which is pretty cool. I do think like the only thing is like the final area is kind of quiet, but you know, what can you do? But otherwise, yeah, sounds great. I really like the music's really good, and it really fits in with the cyberpunky aesthetic of the game. Even like little things like the radio in Hank's place is really like cool. It plays all this old school like rock from the 20th century. Let's see, what else do I want to say? Alright, let's talk about the gameplay. This game is actually really interesting, where it's both an RPG and an action RPG in some sense. It's almost a platformer, and as well as a shoot 'em up game together. And that's actually really interesting, because there's no game I can think of that works like this. The only game that's actually really close to similar to how this game works is Potful Mail. Of the stream games we played, Potful Mail, which is actually the very first RPG I played on this stream, is the only one that kind of reminds me of Dex as well. Because like in Potful Mail, the character was, you basically had you were attacking things and you were jumping around as well. Like it was a platform very similar to Dex. The only thing is like that game is a lot hard. I would say that Potful Mail is a lot harder compared to Dex, which is certainly is actually easier because it's easier to power up. In Potful Mail, you can be full power up and the game is still plenty hard. But yeah, whereas Potful Mail was more about like, yeah, you jumped around, you had to navigate through mazes. Like, but that was all there is just like you would slash with your sword and you cast spells. This game is also very similar, where the guns are kind of like your ranged attacks. And then you don't really have spells per se, but you have a lot melee to help you get through the combat sections. And if you didn't do the side quest, I can see the game being pretty hard, because like your stats would just be like punching some of those tougher enemies later on is going to be really, really hard, because you're pretty weak. You're pretty weak when you first start out, and so you want to get all your implants and everything. So I like the fact that you're kind of incentivized to do side quests because you get a lot of EXP from them. And by getting a lot of EXP does make the game a lot easier. And it's pretty cool. Some of the upgrades are pretty cool, like the lightning fists. I do think, like, and also I like the fact that not only is leveling up the character like good for combat, but there are certain sections you can't go to without like anti-gas and anti-electric, and I like the fact that you were encouraged to. There are some areas you can't explore yet because you don't have the anti-gas, anti-electric, but I love that you can, once you get that and you get the high jump and you get like the lockpick level 2, then you can just go anywhere. And it's actually really cool to like, hey, I remember this place. It's almost very Metroid-like. Whereas that's one thing, like, this game is almost Metroid-like at certain times, where there's some backtracking, you have to remember how to get to certain areas, but like you're encouraged to do so. You just want to explore. You want to explore the entire city because there's just really cool things you can find. Sometimes you'll find an NPC whose side quest you can take, or sometimes you'll just find some random treasure. So it's actually very satisfying to go throughout this interesting world that the designers crafted, and like that's actually what I really like the most. It's just exploring and having fun and exploring the city of Harbor Prime. The dungeons are pretty like, well, yeah, they are what they are. They're pretty linear. There are some like places you can go off the beaten path and check it out, but for the most part, it's not really like. You might just find just more items and things. And sometimes, and I think this game, like, they give you the option of stealth, but almost always you want to just kill more enemies, because the other thing to mention is that game's pretty interesting in that it is not possible to grind in this game. There is no place where you get infinite enemies, unlike other RPGs where you can find a place to run around and fight enemies over and over again. This game does not provide that. So you are going to make do with whatever resources you have. So you want to take on the only way to get leveled up is either by side quests or you buy the EXP from Georgich, which is very limited, and that's only finite. He doesn't sell it a lot. He doesn't sell an infinite number. So all the sellers also don't sell an infinite number of things. So you have to make those choices. So the game is all about choices. Even from the gameplay design standpoint, you have to make the harder choices where you're like, do I want to do this? Do I want to level up? Do I want to take this side quest? And there's other things like the implants. Also, you cannot get every single implant in the game, so you have to make that choice early. You have to make the choice of like, which implants do I really want? Because I ended up maxing my implant slots, so I had to choose certain things I didn't want. So it actually is pretty cool that the game, like, even though the game limits you that much, like if you're with some practice, you can probably get through most of the game. And also, if you notice, if you go to like the options, like here, you can change the combat difficulty to casual if you want to have an easier time. So thankfully, the game is not too unkind to give you something really painful. And you have the option of English to check if you do get the latest version of the game. Let's see. And yeah, I actually think like adding the cyberspace where like aspect's pretty cool to like kind of like emphasize like how cyberspace is so important. At this point, humanity is so dependent on cyberspace, so it's actually like I like the fact they represented the gameplay is kind of represented the world too, because you also have the cyberspace where you have like cyber defenses and you gotta hack. It's kind of old school-y, like one of those old school cyberpunk hacker movies, and it's really really cool that to do that too. You feel pretty awesome. The game is mostly not too buggy. There are some decision trees that cause some minor bugs, like it'll repeat a line that you already heard before, even though you already did it. But it's nothing major. So for the most part, I didn't run into any game-breaking bugs like I did in Aryan Legacy of the Koryodan. That was kind of that game was kind of buggy, whereas this game was like a bit more tightly coded. I had a lot of fun doing this one. Anything else I want to say about the gameplay? The controls feel pretty good. The combat controls are fun. The hit detection's a little strange sometimes. But once you get used to it, it's not too bad. It's just a minor thing where like sometimes it feels like you're not hitting the opponent. It is easy to get overwhelmed, so you will have to use your ability to get out of things. And guns are very strong in this game, so it's very easy to get hit by a gun. It's really hard to avoid getting shot, so you have to be mindful of that. That is one thing where I'm like, it doesn't seem like that gun hit me, but I still took damage. I don't understand. The other thing to mention is that, yeah, there's just like, at least a lot, like even though your hits sometimes don't feel like it hits all the time, but at least you have a lot of dodging, you have a lot of speed, and you're a very agile character, so you can get through a lot of places very, very quickly. And there's oftentimes one really cool thing is that even in dungeons, if you don't want to fight, you can actually choose a different route and you can avoid you can avoid a lot of the fighting, and you can just reduce it down. Like, let's just say if you didn't have regen like I did, you could just use the other routes and just not level up and just like try to get around it. So it is possible to just go through with just as stealthy as possible. I suppose if you got the mirror shake cloak ability, you would be able to go invisible, and you can avoid a lot of encounters that way too. It's actually really nice that they actually provide another path for you if you want to go full stealth instead of like what I did, which is like, I prefer combat. I actually like fighting, and stealth actually makes me very nervous, to be honest. And I'm glad, yeah. But I got the chance to fight. I got to fight, and eventually like I got through it, so it's not too bad. Boom, boom, boom. Oh no, not that joke. Yeah, no, there's some kind of like, oh, you can have sex with these people. Cool. Yeah, oh, that's your favorite part. Okay. So the final boss being in cyberspace is pretty interesting too. I thought we were gonna have like a gigantic fight against the crow, but the crow was actually surprising too, like who the crow really is. and you realize she's just somebody. She's just normal. Like she was actually sickly. She's women like in a position of weakness actually, but she still commands so much respect that people were like talk to her directly. But it is pretty interesting. Anyway, so yeah, I think for the most part the gameplays worked pretty well. Like you had the focus, and you had the cyberspace. You could even hack the real world for a moment to like just see things. It was actually really really cool. Like some really creative abilities that a creative marriage of three genres that I wouldn't have thought to. I never played a game like this, so I have to give it props for that. So anything else I want to say? I think for the most part... Oh, I did want to mention about controls for the shooter parts. I'll be honest, like, they're kind of... It's alright, but aiming your ship is a little bit tricky. I had to aim the ship, you need to use the right D-pad. Not the right D-pad, the right stick to aim. And sometimes I got a little... It was kind of difficult to aim, to get the game to aim it correctly. So that got a little tricky. I almost wonder it might be easier with keyboard, where you actually have... You can actually maybe use the mouse to control it, so maybe that would have been better. I do think for controller it's a very tricky thing to do. I actually don't even know how it would fix it, but like yeah, I think just aiming was a little bit odd in this game. For like the even aiming your gun is also pretty tricky too. Like anything where you had to aim, I had a lot of trouble with, like especially with the guns. Like I had my my cursor would just keep shooting, and it was really hard to keep my aim steady. So that is one thing I might complain, that the controls are a little bit weird for when anytime you have to aim. So, but for the most part, I guess you can just get through it, and like the game's not so hard that you can't figure out like interesting ways to get around obstacles. You saw some exploits I did where I shot things before they could shoot me. Oh. Alright, so now we come to the verdict. I guess, honestly, the game is actually really short enough that you could just like... It's cheap enough on the stores now that you could just buy it straight out, honestly. I really like this game. Like, I think it's a thumbs up buy for me, personally. Because I love the setting and I like the world. Love the world they created. And I like actually playing the game, which is really fun. Which is more than what I can say for a lot of... For some of the other games we've played on this stream that were also, like, 2D. Like, let's not talk about Child of Light there. Child of Light may have been... Like, I think this might be better. I enjoyed this more than I enjoyed Child of Light at the very least, because at least there's a more interesting setting. Like, this setting was much more, like, not that Child of Light was uninteresting, but this one, the game, like, the environments are a lot more interesting to go through. And there's this dread and horror that goes through, and, like, it's so atmospheric, so good. I think if you were less reflexy, then at least there's the casual difficulty for you to help you get through the game. So I still think, like, even if you don't like RPGs, one thing that's nice about this game is that it's not too long. I think a lot of people complain that, like, RPGs are way too long and they require a huge time investment. And one thing about this game is, like, you don't need it. Like, everything is nicely summarized for you. There's always a quest journal. You always are told where to go, so you never lose that guidance. And once you find a new area, you can warp back at any time. That's actually one thing I wanted to say about gameplay. More gameplay stuff. Like, it's so nice to be able to warp back and forth at any time. It's so good. And saving any time is a huge help. Because some of those sections get a little bit dicey at times. And it's great that you can save any time. I'm so glad this game has a save anytime ability. And so, even if you're new to the genre, I think you would really like this. Or you've never really played an RPG... You can totally just kind of go into the story and just have fun with this one, because like you can get to explore. It's really fun. So yeah, thumbs up buy for even people who are not really big into RPGs as well, because like everything's really simplified. So there's no like, you don't have to think about equipment stats and all this like number crunching. You just kind of go in and then you get an upgrade, and then like it's easy. You just pick what upgrade you want and you're done. So it's very simplified. Okay. Well, Illusion Queen, I guess I'll see you later. Let me see. anything else I want to say about the game? Yeah, so thumbs up buy from me. From pretty much anybody should get this, and it's very cheap on the store on Steam right now. So if you are cheap, you can certainly wait for it to be cheaper. I think it's right $20 right now, $20 US. So totally worth it. The game is perfectly long enough at that rate. So like, yeah, definitely check it out. And you can just even support something like just how like a studio from not the US and not Japan is like. So yeah, that was great. I really enjoyed the game. It was nice and short. I got a lot out of it just even from playing it, and I would definitely recommend it. And I guess yeah, that about wraps up my review. I think this was a good choice. I'm so glad I got to play this finally after I was originally gonna play this about 2 years ago, but I ended up certain like the schedules didn't accommodate it, and we were waiting for the Wii U version, and that never came out. So I decided to just say screw it, let's just go for the PC version. And besides, it's going to be the best looking version anyway, and it is. It was really nice. So yeah, I think that wraps up my review. So with the review